Jordan. So let me pull up the slides here. So yeah, so we have, I'd like to start today just with a couple of discussion topics. I'm sorry, let me find where my share screen is. There we go. And I think that's what today will be a lot about is since we have VR counselors on, it'd be lovely if whenever we're talking about a subject, if folks could, VR counselors could share and let us know what's valid, maybe what's not. Jordan, I can share screen. Is there? Yeah.
You should be able to.
Okay, it's just not, the PowerPoint isn't showing up. Okay, let me close it out.
Give it a try now.
Okay. There we go, great. It's great that we have providers and counselors. And let me know if this is how I like to share the PowerPoints, just so you can see it and I can see everybody as much as I can with Zoom. But this is a big topic, right? Understanding the role of the VR counselor in VR services. And not getting into to tons of history or anything, but I this week had a call. I'm working in Florida, and as you may or may not know, sometimes it's hard to get a vendor into the system so they can be paid by the state. And in Florida, for whatever reason, it seems especially hard. And the guy what they need bought is the guy's going to do an accessible kind of boat tours and fishing tours and stuff, and he uses a wheelchair. And so they're trying to find vendors who don't, if you're going to buy something at Walmart or for here in West Virginia, or kind of work clothes, there's places to go that get a lot of work, so they're already vendors. But this guy needs he needs a lift for the boat to get out of the water so it can be cleaned and repaired, and then he needs ramps, to get to make the dock, the slip accessible. And then also the ownership of the dock has become, is new. So we need to get that in the vendor system. And for those of us who are in this world, we know what VR is roughly. We know, what, kind of roughly what they do again, but we may have our limited perspectives. Like if you've done work that's traditionally, that also includes Medicaid work, then your interactions with VR counselors is typically limited to kind of, the needs or circumventing the barriers of those individuals. And so, like for instance, when I was doing some research, one of my colleagues in Iowa, the caseload is roughly, VR counselors are working with a caseload that's roughly 150 to 200 people. I know it's not like that in South Dakota. But they have roughly 3 to 5% of their caseloads are like support employment, customized employment. So it's not a big part of what people do. And so I think there is, even those of us, when we interact a lot, there's still a lot of maybe knowledge or lack of knowledge about how VR counselors spend their day beyond what we see. And then also kind of what else they're doing or the variety of their role. So the example is, I got to talk to the marina and others and explain how, VR started, I think it may have been 1917, or I may be getting the date wrong, but it was started to, as World War I veterans came back and to assist with vocational training and needs. And then over time, especially I think the 73 Rehabilitation Act is, it expanded it started with soldiers, and then as time passed, kind of the experience of disability broadened, eventually getting to the 73 version, which is the most broad, and I think has been used since then. So anyway, so today, does somebody want to say something?
You're right on your list.
Oh, Brenda? Oh, maybe not. So anyway, so today is about that. And it's good that we have providers and counselors because again, it's a big topic. It looks different if you're in Iowa or if you're in South Dakota, if you're in Florida. And so want to make sure that we're having a conversation about that, and people can fill in the gaps. So I did want to, and I did not adjust this, but as the is the next COP and the training webinar 24th, Jordan, or that got changed, and I'm just late on the date there.
No, the dates are. So the next community of practice is May 27th.
Oh, gotcha.
So those are always going to be the fourth Thursday of the month. And just because of the way that's scheduled, then the next provider training will be on May 24th. So the trainings are going to be on the fourth Monday, and the community of practices are going to be on the fourth Thursday. So just the way this month worked out, they'll be on the same week, and the training will be on the 24th, and the community of practice will be on the 27th.
Great, sorry about that. Okay, goal. So just say, yeah, so that next one, working with individuals with criminal records, I think is the next one. And the next community of practice and the next training webinar, job development, contacting businesses and employers on the 24th. What I wanted to ask and kind of have this, and would like to involve everybody, as many people as want to talk as possible. I think this is sometimes a really cool kind of thinking exercise and conversation topic, which goes along the lines typically of, before you did the thing, what did you think would happen? After you did the thing, tell us what actually happened. So I think it's a nice kind of expectations and ideas of kind of roles in the job versus kind of what actually happened. So I wanted to ask if people to chime in, both in the role of the CRP, and then as the role of counselors. So when you first started your job, what did you think was the role of a VR counselor in VR services? So start with that one. If people would, right? Like when you first started, what was your knowledge of VR? Like if your boss taught you about VR, what were they telling you that the role was of the VR counselor, right? If those of you that work in CRPs. Did you know what VR was, or DRS? I guess in this case, VR, vocational rehabilitation. Sorry, is the acronym.
I'll go on this one since nobody else wants to.
Thanks.
When I first started, I was actually a job coach, so I kind of got to know a little bit of the interaction through the job that I was in, and then ended up doing some shadow alongs, and my boss kind of told me a little bit more about it. But we have really awesome counselors in my area, and they're very open, and they explain everything that they do to us. They, as they're doing things, they let us know why they do what they do or why they're doing something a certain way. So I credit some of it to the employment specialist that I had in my area at that time, but I think the counselors played a big role in just explaining themselves what it is that they do.
And how long did it take you to, you think, to get a grasp kind of on what the role was and what to expect? And
well, I don't think you ever get a grasp because everything is constantly changing.
Right.
But I'm a supervisor now. I'm the director, and I give my employment specialists 6 months to kind of get a good understanding of what their job is compared to what the counselor's job is, and that kind of the core responsibilities of it. So I would say within a year, you should be able to be doing great and understanding everybody's roles.
Cool. Another CRP or community rehab provider?
When I started, or when I first learned about VR, I was learning about it not as a job developer or a job coach. And I think what I pictured VR as is really what the job developer is doing. So now I'm kind of, now that we're moving into that role, I'm seeing a lot of things kind of shift. And I felt like I had good knowledge coming in, but I'm learning that there's a lot of things that I need to shift my understanding of, or a lot of pieces that need to get filled in.
Mhm. Cool. So you thought VR, voc rehab, or MRS or DRS was more like the job development piece.
Yep.
The final part.
I started out, or I'm in adult education, so I kind of knew about them from meetings that we had. And so I think what I pictured is what our staff who does job development a little bit more, what her role is.
Cool. Great. Maybe one more from the CRP perspective. Please.
Yeah, I'll chime in.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryce.
I never knew VR counselors existed prior to this job I had. So a lot of it was learning from the very beginning, the role that they play as we give out services for individuals. So it took about 9 months or so to have a basic understanding of what our VR counselor does and what their role is and everything. And so it was a neat experience. Like I said, I never knew they even existed prior to working in employment services.
Right. Awesome.
I definitely am with Bryce. I had no idea what a VR counselor was until I started job coaching employment specialists. So yeah, and it took a little while to get the full picture of what they do and, you know, how everything works together. So
yeah, cool. Awesome. So now, if we could ask the VR counselors on board, I think I think for and again, I know you guys, you build relationships and you get to kind of see behind the curtain, but I think part of what I'd like to, obviously I said we like to talk about is to help CRPs understand kind of all the stuff that VR does, or counselors do. So, but I think part of getting insight into kind of where counselors are is to hear from a couple counselors about kind of, how about your idea of the job before you did it. And then, as time passed, what actually happened, if that makes sense. So if we get a couple of counselors to jump in, that'd be awesome. Please.
So I'm Ann Fortin, voc rehab counselor in Aberdeen. My previous experience to voc rehab was following my older sister along who had gotten VR services to go to college from SBVI. So when I applied, I had like this much knowledge. I knew about the college side and how they had helped her. Yeah. But when I got in, I think it felt like it took 7 years to get the full scope of what all voc rehab does. Before I really was like, oh, that's what we do. So,
how many years? You said 7?
7.
Okay. So could you add specific, if you wouldn't mind, you don't have to share what you don't want to, but could you just share like what was your ideas about what rehab did prior, like through your sister's experience? Does that make sense? Yeah, specifically? Yeah.
I thought it was only, like helping people go to college, high school students with disabilities to go to college. But then when I started working, I discovered, oh, it's not just college, it's jobs. And it's not just high school students. It's, anything you can think of to have a meaningful day, basically. And it's not just people who are deaf or blind, it's all disabilities. And the scope is just broad, which is why then it takes about 7 years to kind of have experienced everything at least once to feel like, okay, I've seen it all now.
Cool. And then I guess if you wouldn't mind to just sharing, again, kind of details, what do you think are some of the things that you learned that I mean, obviously, if you experience things through a family member, somebody you love, you're going to see what they, how they interacted with it, and kind of I think that's a great insight into what we think of services, is that typically our information comes from our personal experience with it. And that's why some people don't know VR exists at all, or may think they exist in a certain context. What are some of the things that maybe most surprised you, right? Or that you least expected, I guess, right? That ends up being a part of the job. Like you said, you experience everything. Like, what are maybe some of the things that took a while to experience, or that people may be surprised is part of a counselor's job, if they're not like, and you're like shadowing you every day for 7 years.
Yeah. So some of the more random things that would happen, people who are injured on the job, so like a workman's comp case, doesn't happen every other day. Some of the mental health impairments and implications that we end up dealing with in terms of in employment and how to accommodate. I think I've been in the job for 19 years and have dealt with 2 prosthetic limbs, which is unusual. That's the kind of random, medical restoration kind of thing that we can dabble in at times. But it's a pretty rare occasion. So it's not just IEP meetings and, finding job placement. There's a whole lot of accommodation, restoration, and stuff like that goes into what we do.
Cool.
This is Brenda. I think for me, it was, I haven't had anyone yet with physical disabilities, but most of the disabilities have been mental issues, and I think that's even harder. I don't know. And then also the passion that I bring to it, my participants don't necessarily bring the same passion for finding it. Like, I'm all psyched about getting them a job, but then, I'm not going to do that job. I'm not going to go in at 11. I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that, not because of any disabilities, but I'm not sure what that's all about. I'm like, you need money, right? Yeah. Okay.
So how do you, like, I'm sorry. For those people, how do you bump into them? Like, how do they come to your attention?
Oh, because VR sends them, refers them to me.
Okay. Okay, you work for CRP. I'm sorry, Brenda.
Yes.
My bad.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Jordan, would you mind talking a little bit? You had written some great stuff.
Yeah, so I actually was a provider for 2 years before I was a VR counselor. And so I was young. I was 23 when I started counseling. And so I went in kind of assuming that I knew what I was going to be doing. And I was wrong. I think the thing that was the biggest realization for me is being a VR counselor is so much about helping meet people's various needs. And so, you might have, or we might have one client that's working not only with you guys as a provider, but independent living choices and mental health services. And they might be doing, training through a career learning center or something like that. So I think the thing that was the biggest shock to me was just the sheer amount of different people that could be involved and should be involved to help our clients be successful. So, having come from a provider where I was one part of that, and then coming into being a VR counselor and learning about all those other services that are available to people and helping coordinate and connect people to those, I think was one of the biggest things that was an eye opener, I think, to me. And two, coming from being a provider, just seeing that piece of assisting with looking for employment or learning a job, because my title was an employment specialist. So I did job development and job coaching. I did the whole piece of it, that whole part of it. But, also learning about all the training opportunities that we could do and the counseling part of it. I think in addition to that I already said, I think the other thing that was really interesting to me and eye-opening becoming a counselor was the difference working with somebody who was born with a disability versus somebody who had acquired it. Because that becomes, depending on what that looks like for the person, that becomes a bigger part of their rehabilitation and their services with us, depending on how they're doing with those things.
Right. Cool, thanks, Jordan. Anybody else want to share, especially VR counselors? No, Laura, would you mind? Sorry, since you wrote. Do you have the ability to talk?
Sure, yeah. Hi, Russell.
Hey.
I don't know if you saw in the chat, I kind of have been through the gamut. No, it's been a wonderful gamut with VR. I started as a counselor aide, kind of a couple years out of college and kind of worked my way through various positions. So I threw in there that, again, like for counselors in general, because there is so many different partnerships that we develop or people that we connect with, I feel like we have to know a little bit about pretty much everything out there and then try to find those and connect those dots for people's supports or things that they may be needed, whether that again is a 14-year-old in high school or a 72-year-old recareering person. When you think of that lifespan of people that you guys support or that we support through like CSP involvement, we do that for a lot of different people in a lot of different scenarios. And I kind of come back to Ann and Jordan's comment too about, people that have acquired a disability and kind of just being in the moment through that guidance and counseling, trying to help navigate what does life look like after that life-changing event, if you will, or even for people who have had a disability all their life, there's different phases of life that might change their path or direction or what they want. And so, I think over the years, I've reflected a lot in how before you might have considered, or people may have considered VR more of kind of like that broker of service where we're just maybe adding a service and hoping it works. And now we've really taken kind of a turn, through my career with VR in terms of really spending time in those conversations and or activities with clients, which we do use providers for, to try to hopefully find a better option or the next best fit for that person versus just kind of throwing things out and hoping it sticks. So I guess that would be what I would add to what's been already said at this time.
Great, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad and embarrassing to say, but there was a point, where I just didn't understand everything that VR does. And I basically, I think you said as a broker to services, I would be a bit more crass and I would probably say, that's where we go to get the money. Like that's a horrible thing to, like you guys are the money people. And not understanding. And I think it's been wonderful, just the work. I know like, this next 5 years and the work we've done in some other states. I had a counselor in Ohio once kind of sit me down after a training where maybe I said something wrong, but she was part of a team. And she just like calmly kind of explained to me that basically what she said was, and I kind of paraphrase, what she basically said, what the number one thing or the most valuable thing maybe or something like that we do is, what that is? And so I pay for job development, pay for, and she's like, she's super kind again. Like, no, the number one thing we do is counseling, is that our job is to get to know people, like you just said, and not, and not kind of throw spaghetti at the wall, kind of see what sticks. But our job, and again, people are within constraints of time and space and overworked. I know that all of us are, it's like you get another new duty, same job title every day. But she just always helped me understand that if if you do it well, counselors love to be, like that's their primary job is to help people navigate, whether it's, experience a new bit or acquire disability or maybe, things haven't worked or they're new, they haven't really tried much, is to help people kind of get information and kind of navigate their options. And she also helped me, if you do it right, maybe the reason like counselors aren't so keen or you have that view is because you're not asking for help. You're not, counselors feel that you just view them as a funding source, or as opposed to like a team member, somebody who knows the person way before you ever did, and may know them really, really well over time, depending on the person, and who has insights, it can contribute, and it has this specialized kind of skill set, if you think about it, I mean, if you think of like employment or discovery or the traditional or customized, what comes with experience is that you get some ideas about how to problem solve, and not that you're tracking people based on any kind of label or criteria, but that you learn, that you learn how to help people navigate complex situations. And if you think of all the resources, I mean, on the positive side and all the tools that are available, it's VR, the way I say is like VR counselors can like move the heavens and the earth, and do that's just amazing things. The VR system can do amazing things and has done amazing things. If those of us that are outside of it can kind of understand it and understand where people are coming from and kind of how they want to contribute and how they can contribute. So I just, I think that that's a really important point. I think part of, and I think again, in a small state where people know each other, it's likely y'all had a lot of this information, but I think part of today, again, I'd like to just maybe underline that point that it's, not just where you go to get the authorization to do discovery or do job development, but there's other things that counselors and the VR system as a whole can contribute. So cool. Okay, what have you learned? We kind of already talked about that. And then moving on, this is also another, we'll do this exercise and then I'd like to have a conversation on every slide and end with another exercise. But I just think this is an interesting question again, and again, when you're on big topics, I've had like, especially if you're in an education setting, you're around teachers or secondary, post-secondary, if you're in a training setting or any setting, I think it's just a good question to ask, which is, what is VR for? I can relate this to maybe some other settings, but how would you, like, if in your own words, maybe some people haven't spoken, how would you say, if somebody asks like, why, if you meet somebody and you're talking about VR, or if you're a counselor, you meet somebody and you want to share, again, assuming that maybe they didn't come in, they know a little bit about it, but, or even if they do, how would you describe it? What is VR for? What would you say? And there's no right answer to this. Somebody could jump in. And Jordan, I'm realizing I think I pulled up the one I'd sent you, not the one with your edits. So I'm going to switch here in a second. So could somebody take a stab at that, if you don't mind?
So the question, this is Mike out of Aberdeen, Voc Rehab.
Hey.
The question is, what is VR for in general, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's one right answer. I mean, thanks, Jordan. That's what you just emailed me that. Just thought. Yes. Yeah, what would you say it's for?
I think it's for helping people develop a little bit of hope and then facilitating movement through all the different systems and options that they didn't know were there and the hoops that are presented, and then having someone along for the ride until they can reach their goal.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, somebody else? You don't mind?
This is Adam from Aberdeen as well. So for me, I think it's seeing that confidence grow in somebody. I think that's very important to watch them from when we start to where we end and kind of building that trust with them. I think that really is helpful.
Cool. Okay, I mean, I think that like confidence, trust, so relationship building. I really like helping people find some hope, you know. Cool. What else? Providing individualized support to people through their employment journey. Great. Anybody else?
While we're paused real quick, I'm gonna just announce the code word if that's okay.
Okay, cool.
Our code word for this month is improvement. And I will go ahead and put that in the chat as well as the attendance form as well. So again, the code word is improvement.
I'll add in, Russell, this is Laura.
Hey.
I love the drawing you have on there. And I know Jordan had done a PowerPoint like that not long ago too, because
Okay.
I think like any of you guys on this call, that's how it feels most time. Like we've got this, what we think is beautiful idea and plan in place and everybody's kind of on the same page. And then sure enough, you take a dip and a dive and then you have a good day and then something else changes. And I think like our 20-second elevator speech, I have always struggled of like what it is, what's VR for, what do you do? Because there's just so many considerations and facets that come into play that I've never come up with like a beautiful answer for that. So if you have any good ideas, Russell, throw them out there. But yeah, I think, you know, I agree with Mike and Adam as far as kind of the moving forward in, you know, supporting people's employment goals and figuring out what that looks like on an individual basis is truly what we're for. And I think going back to the first question, part of what surprised me about VR was kind of that budget side, and that you mean we have some funding that can help complement the goals people have, whereas like the mental health system, they don't have that. You know, if they need something, you know, they're kind of just figuring out again those other resources, but that funding stream that kind of falls with VR that we are responsible for ultimately has, you know, I think there's meaning and value behind that, and also comes some expectations, you know, of the counselors, and that we need to be responsible with how we're looking at that, you know, and service wise consistently. So
yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's, I mean, ultimately, I mean, I do think, like, and I hope this, I stole, Jordan, I don't know if you had the same one, but I stole it from maybe Twitter or somewhere, Facebook, but, and I don't want to, like, it can be, you know, we have plans, right? And I think that's, you know, if you think about disability or people experiencing disability, I mean, to me, like the synonym to disability is complexity, you know, and just, I think that's the best way to describe disability is that it's going through the day and living your life is more complicated and sometimes more, and often more expensive. So I think that if I think about, and that's what that is basically, is the idea that, and the example we use in the training is like, if you want to go to a movie, like, and what are the steps? What's it look like to go to a movie? But if you think of somebody who's receiving human services or experiences disability, it doesn't receive, I mean, it's just not sometimes so straightforward. You know, there are other considerations, other complications to do things that those of us that don't officially experience disability maybe don't have to plan as much for, think about as much for. So I think, to me, I think that's kind of, you know, one of the answers, I think, is what VR is for, is to help people deal with or I guess respond to complexity. And what oftentimes with complexity, there's barriers related that is caused by the complexity. And so that's kind of the, you know, what happened is that for almost everybody that we work with in the VR system, there's some kind of complexity and then a barrier that results from that complexity that needs addressing. And so that I kind of, you know, the optimistic, or some, you know, what that means to me is that when people, you know, it's not a straight line, because sometimes you don't know what the barriers are until you go down the path a little bit. But I think VR, you know, again, this is not an official, it's on the Rehab Act, but I think what VR is for is to help people circumvent and work around complexity, whatever that, as a result of, that results because of disability, whatever that may be. And oftentimes, like, you know, there's multiple complexities, there's kind of a series of them. So that's why I kind of think, you know, it's for helping people solve problems, which I think I've already mentioned, and kind of navigate what it sometimes can be a complex life, you know, whether it's prosthetics, the need, you know, hearing aids, support services, accommodations, transportation issues, learning what work is about, you know. It's a complexity that if you haven't had those life experiences, that is maybe that people have, you know, during their younger age, which we'll talk about pre-ETS here in a little bit. I think that's one of the things it's for. I also think, I mean, obviously, and this is kind of what I was saying, and let me know what you think about this. Like, whenever I think about what's education for, what's training for, ultimately, I think it's for work, right? What's education for? Why do you need education? I mean, you could have all these other arguments about citizenry and being responsible, or obvious, and I think those are great points. Ultimately, you know, it's to function, I think, you know, in the adult world, which expects work for the most part, and then training too. You know, it's for work. So I think, like you said, I think some of what VR is for, or I don't know what percentage of, but it's for work. I mean, that's the right. And we'll talk a little bit about like VR systems and Medicaid systems. I mean, but that's kind of what the goal is that the successful closure, right? And typically that means people are working in some job or career that fits them. Any other thoughts about that? Anybody want to add anything? So yeah, Laura, I think part of it is I don't know if it's not a magic answer, just it's helping people figure out how to move forward, right? What the next step is, you know, what they want to do with their work life, and not just think about, but act on it. Okay. Would it be okay to take 5 real quick, because I need to pull in the other PowerPoint, Jordan, that I mistakenly didn't pull up, and then we'll come back because I'll switch them so you don't have to watch me fumble with that. Is that cool? All right, sorry about that. So so like 3:46-ish or so. I'll take a break and go get some water or something. Okay. Cool, thanks. Okay, so moving on. And these are, this is South Dakota specific information. What we had mentioned earlier is that contracted employment services, and you know, not just as support employment or customized employment, but services that an employment organization is likely to see is part of the counselor's job. And so the caseload approximately is about 68 individuals, you know, plus or minus, and about 30% of individuals, which is roughly 18 plus or minus, will be referred to provider services, right? So So again, I like to think of that as, if you think of like the black box of what happens over there, when we're not involved, or what's behind the curtain. And it's like, again, that iceberg image that we use for employment training, that we see a relatively small, and that's actually high, based on some other states, a little bit high, 30%, but we're seeing about 30% of kind of, what counselors are involved with in any given, when we are interacting with them. It would it be okay if, and again, this was an estimate from when Jordan and I just briefly talked, could a couple of counselors just share, I think, what their rough caseload is, and again, you won't know exactly, but how many, give us a, and well, the other thing is when you think about other services that are coordinated, obviously it's not only folks who are receiving Medicaid services or intellectual or developmental disability services or mental health related supports, but also others. So Alicia, if you don't mind, I'll ask you. So rough 75. So you're on the higher side of that. And then can I ask how is that determined? Like, do you have a do you negotiate that with the state of South Dakota? So if it gets over that, you get paid more, or if it gets less, you do other things, or just kind of.
We are assigned territories, so if it really depends on the territory. If there's 75 clients in the territory, you have 75 clients, or if there's 150 in that territory, then you have 150.
Okay.
Just depends.
Okay. Do you know before you're assigned, or I guess before you get that territory, what the relative size of that is, or is there a way that if you, I guess I'm curious because I'd guess that there's probably a different, there's just a math difference of the time, if you divide 150 divided by 40 hours in a week, or 4.33 times 40 or 75. How does that work out for the difference there, if you have 75 versus if you had 100 or 150, in terms of how you spend your time, or does that make sense? Or not? Does that make sense? Like, I just think the job would look a little bit different if you have a bigger caseload, and it would look different if you have a smaller case. Do you find that there are it just depends on who's in the region? So it's based on kind of population?
Well, it's based on population. I have a pretty sparsely populated area. I've put a lot of work into getting those 75. I went out and looked for people and recruited people.
Okay.
And it really just depends on who needs me that day. I try to get to everybody as often as possible, but there are some people that just, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Sure.
If they're in my face, then they get more attention, and the people that don't need as much help don't get as much attention. So.
Right. Cool. So that's a little bit, I didn't have that on any of the, and in fact, it wasn't something that's on any slides, but recruitment. That's a bit of a, I don't know if I'd say unusual, but it's not something that I think that we think a lot about. What VR counselors are doing themselves to make the services known and to pull people in. Could you talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind?
I think just based on my own experience, when you get to the more remote territories, the further you get from that population center, the less trust there is for that population center and the government offices that are there. So as I've become like a common fixture in the towns, I'm Alicia, I'm not the state of South Dakota. So people are more open to connecting with me and letting me help them. And in small towns, everybody talks. So if you help one person, everybody knows, and then they're more open to coming to you. So it's not necessarily that I'm, tracking people down and begging them to sign up, but I'm just
Yeah.
showing them, being an example and approachable and non-threatening,
Yeah.
that, these services are for you too, not just people in big towns. And we do care. We haven't forgotten you. And as that trust grows, then people are more willing to come to VR, and that drives the caseloads.
Cool. So do you have a goal that are you shooting for 100 or just...
Well, my goal was 75, so I
Okay.
finally broke that this week.
This week. Okay. So have you set another goal yet, or celebrate for a while?
Well, I've
Take it
got
easy.
75 on the books, and I've got 5 to 10 more that I'm working on getting applications for as soon as possible. And I think as the weather improves, during the summer months, the focus shifts from students who are really easy to connect with in the schools to more community-based adult outreach.
Yeah.
So,
And do you have like partners, like community partners? I mean, obviously the work speaks for itself, so when you're helping people, they're going to talk. But are there community partners where you can go, do you think, help also spread the word? Or
well, I started with the schools, and then, as I become more familiar with the communities, small towns are a little distrustful. So it's taken a year, almost 2, of just being that lady that keeps showing up. Other community members are now starting to reach out and kind of give me hints and tips and point me in directions and ask questions. So
yeah, cool. Like I guess, for instance, like is there a vendor or any vendors in your area that interact with people? That
yeah,
also...
I wish.
No,
I
okay.
wish. I don't have any.
No. Okay. Interesting.
I'm the whole team.
You're the whole team. Cool. Cool. Well, and being from West Virginia, we had when there's sometimes those grants for underserved, and there's another word that goes with that, people don't have access to services. And we had the same experience when we tried to. And it's a little different. Well, yes, we have the hills here, and so it's hard to access certain areas. And we tried to do outreach, like we had the same experience, like people, it's small towns or not even towns, I don't know what, but people wouldn't really talk to us. And I think especially like we didn't do a good job of we learned, that people don't really like talking about like the government all the time, or about like their, part of it was like it was a Social Security kind of ticket to work thing. So about their draw, SSI or SSDI, and hey, you can work. We were literally told that people were worried that if they told us, later on we found out that if they told us they wanted to work, then, I mean, it's not a stretch to say like then the feds would come in and, just by telling us they wanted to work, the black helicopters would come in and take away, the people's support. So, and the way we learned, we did kind of exactly what you've done, is we ended up hiring somebody that lived in the community, and it was well known. And so once it was somebody who was known, who could be trusted, opened up. But he connected with, his actually main connection was with a church, a local church. And that's what kind of asking about that he found that through the church, you could really get a word out, and then there were, stuff like, some other kind of outreach, things like that. But
I've had really good luck with laundromats.
yes. Yeah. That's where people are hanging out sometimes, yeah. Cool. And how do you walk in? Yeah. Not be I guess if you do your laundry there, that would be a good way to do it.
I leave pamphlets in the laundromat.
Okay. Yeah,
it's
cool.
boring, so they read the pamphlet and get inspired, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because we actually helped a guy start a business within a business in a laundromat in that little town. Because you have kind of a captured audience. There's a lot of cool things you can do with that. Interesting. Cool. Awesome. And then so anybody else could somebody else share kind of their approximate caseload? So 75 people and none of them are going to employment services. They're not being vendored out at all.
Oh, well, the people that live in Aberdeen proper do have some options, but once you get outside the city of Aberdeen, there's pretty much one provider for all of Northeast South Dakota. And she can only be in so many places at a time.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I fill in.
Yeah. Cool. Could somebody else share? Another counselor, if you don't mind. Just rough approximate caseloads. Jordan, I don't want to ask you to, I don't know who's of you are seeing who's not. Can you call on somebody who wouldn't want to murder you if you did that? Or somebody who knows you're...
I can tell you a little bit about my caseloads too, if that
Okay.
helps.
Cool. Yeah, I hate calling on people, and I was going to ask you to do it. So, but if you don't mind.
So I worked as a counselor before I took this position a couple of years ago. I worked as a counselor in Watertown for 4 years, and my case was about 80 there. And then I transferred to the Brookings office, and my caseload in Brookings was about 60 on average.
Okay. And then is that, do you find that was roughly true, the 30%-ish would go?
So mine was actually unique, is that I had fairly specialized caseloads in both offices. So in my Watertown caseload, I was assigned to work with a mental health center there.
Mhm.
So I worked primarily with people that had significant mental illness or that met that criteria and were receiving mental health services and funding through the state. So I did work with individuals from our DD agencies, but not to the same extent that the other counselors in our offices did. And then my caseload in Brookings was actually more of a traveling caseload. So I covered everything between Brookings and Huron, which includes several smaller schools. And so that caseload was primarily transition age students. So I worked with a lot of high school age kiddos on that caseload. So for the two that I covered, it wasn't the case, but I think that that's pretty atypical. It just so happened that the ones that I covered were more specialized because of the areas that they covered.
Okay. And those individuals, they had other organizations involved, the schools and then the mental health services, but maybe not employment direct. Okay, cool.
Right. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So again, following that theme, I mean, one of the things that VR can and does do is this obviously the school stuff. So I've worked with a number of people that VR is involved in helping people, go get their associates or get a bachelor's, or be a part of that process, along with Pell Grants and PASS plans and others. Also specialized training, anything that's in partnering again with if the workforce system is involved, there's sometimes money there, and services, again, not to get too money heavy. That stuff that's happening typically we may or may not be seeing as CRPs. And then assistive technology, helping people, again, that's the complexity, disability, and kind of, the things that to circumvent barriers, the things that must be in place or must be at least worked on. The other thing that I always find super interesting with counselors is, and just with people, but again, it's part of the complexity. I was a part of a kind of a task force on just kind of simplifying and why aren't people working and people with disabilities. And I remember, just we sat down as part of this work group and we counted up all the different governmental agencies or organizations, maybe nonprofits that a person who receives services, needed to interact with, and for one person, I was thinking in mind, we had 8 different ones. And so it's likely not, but although, or I don't know if you say likely or not, but it happens frequently, I'd say that employment is obviously the drive of rehab. And, you have to pay attention and coordinate with the other services that are in the person's life. And one of the things I found that and you guys know this already, that one of the reasons that people didn't want to go to work was just because it was very complicated that they had to report to Social Security, their SNAP benefits. They had to talk to their housing complex for their housing benefit. They had to watch their SSDI trial work periods, month. And then, if they're dealing with a CRP, VR, one guy, I think we count up 8 different services. VR, I've been involved with VR counselors who are themselves, helping people access in Michigan, access what they call CMH, or Community Mental Health Services, which is Medicaid funded. And counselors are involved in that, and they have information, that Medicaid needs, right? How it works hard to help people with if they're struggling with housing, or if they're worried about that benefit. Social Security, how does it work, Jordan, in South Dakota? I'm sorry to ask a basic question, but SSA benefits that you guys use, do you have one in South Dakota or use in other states? WIPA? Sorry, I should know this.
We have our own. We have a network of benefit specialists that are, trying to think, I don't want to speak incorrectly. I think they're all housed in the same offices as our VR counselors for the most part, or they're at least close, so that our benefit specialists are easily accessible to our clients when they do have questions about their benefits.
Okay, cool. So counselors are, just kind of how I view it as an employment kind of person, is that my job isn't necessarily to become an expert in benefits or in how these systems works. I need to know how they work to help people get the information they need, and I have to be able to notice, or recognize issues before they arise. But you have to kind of have relationships with all these different. It's kind of, think of the hub. There's all these different places that counselors are coordinating, and most of them are around basic needs. And then obviously that we had already talked about that the pre-ETs. All of us are probably pretty well versed now in that the counselors are spending a lot of time by decree or by law, that 15%, and this is the general. I'm assuming this is the general division rehab time and money has to be spent on pre-employment transition services. So Jordan, that does not mean that every counselor is going to has to spend 15% of their time. It means that when you look across the board, 15% of your clientele and money have got to be students under the age of 21.
Correct. Yeah, that's something that it's cumulative. So yeah, not each individual counselor has to spend that amount of time, but and that's not even something that really the counselors that we ask them to track. I mean, it's something that we track on the administrative side of things, but just encourage the counselors to be involved with the schools that they're assigned to, and to provide those services to that age group.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, or if somebody else would like to. So that was that 2014 pre-ETs roughly. I was just curious if somebody has a pre-ETs. Before pre-ETs and after pre-ETs, like if you could, or maybe Jordan, you may be the best perspective on this, talk about kind of how things have changed, and what my biggest critique, my biggest issue sometimes is that it seems like with vendors, what happens when the summer comes around is that they kind of abandon, not in South Dakota, but other states. I haven't had the experience yet, but Florida is a big one where like you're doing some other work, the work kind of gets pushed aside for this, and it's a lot of the summer months when they're doing like bigger projects, and so I found that especially the summer months when the kids are out of school, that a lot of the work, kind of the typical adult work, not for everybody, gets kind of pushed aside. I don't remember that happening, where you had to really plan in projects and think about and talk to organizations to say, hey, summer's coming. I know all hands on deck to do your whatever, the summer things for the pre-ETs, but can we make sure, we have to actually think about that ahead of time now. But, Jordan, have y'all noticed a big change or in kind of how you do things? Or
I wouldn't say that we saw a huge change, and I can only speak for the areas that I worked in.
Sure.
And the timeline of when I started working for VR, like I hadn't worked for VR very long before these changes were in place. So I wouldn't say that we see that a whole lot in South Dakota, where, you know, we have other services that are impacted because we're trying to provide these pre-eds. I think, you know, we've kind of taken the stance more where, you know, we're catching individuals with disabilities when they're younger and providing them services that they need to have the same employment experiences as their peers. And I think just as a state, like, people have understood that. And so it worked well and flowed well to where we didn't have interruptions in service in other places in order to provide pre-eds, from my perspective.
Yeah. Anybody else talk about, like, maybe if you work for a CRP and you've been there for a while, and you do pre-eds, have you seen kind of things change, or no? It's interesting because I mean, it's a big money commitment at the least. What happens in a lot of the other states that I'm in, states will do like these, they're not programs, I wouldn't call them, but they're kind of summer, and they're not camps, that's a bad word for them, but kind of a series of, whether it's work experiences or shadowing, or even like kind of teaching young, or teaching youth or people under the age of 21 about, and you know, it's a kind of, it can be a big endeavor because especially in Florida, again, like, they're getting a lot of, they really, maybe there's a lot of young people, a lot more young people there. And it's really a kind of thing that really, it's all hands on deck, like, we're going to do this. And so I think your state probably demographically like mine, where we're a bit older, and maybe, and obviously a lot less people. So perhaps it's not that big of a deal.
Russell, this is Laura, and I can speak for my district too, and I think maybe across the state where we have seen higher transition age kind of numbers come in, or caseloads that may be growing in that transition aged youth, which is great. And then we've also had things in place kind of from day one for youth work. We call it Project Skills, if any providers have heard that term. So I think that helped cover some of that 15%, and, you know, tracking staff time, different things that we've just done. And we do some summer youth. We call them, I think, well, it just depends. Providers, we put out an RFP for providers or school personnel or whoever wants to really to do some summer youth activities around those pre-employment services. So we are doing certain things like that, you know, from behind the scenes. And Katie Grant is one of our, I'm going to slaughter her title, but project coordinators, if you will. There's a better term. Sorry, Jordan, for the transition aged group, basically. So we've got some good people, good hands on deck for a lot of those things. But
cool. And when you put the RFPs out, are they like providers you work with a lot, or are there other not, you know, new, like, people you don't like, who just are special, like schools would be in, if they, we had a program, an interesting, it wasn't necessarily part of pre-eds, but where there's a pilot here where teachers, if they wanted to in the summers, they become vendors. And they'd work just with their students. And the theory was, like, they knew their students best. So in the summers, they would get paid as essentially they ran their own business.
Yeah, so we have that, like Alicia, for example, her Groton School District puts out a request every summer and has basically their group of kids, opens it up to maybe one or two other kids from surrounding school districts, and has you know, some summer time with their students kind of as a separate payer. And then we've had providers do it, and our independent living centers are pretty good about submitting those too in a few of the areas throughout the state. So, but it's open to anybody basically, as long as it kind of meets those pre-ETS requirements.
Cool. You ever have any like colleges or community colleges or anything like that do anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of yet, but not a bad idea.
Yeah. Or like, yeah, interesting. Okay, great. Any other anything else anybody wants to add, or could I guess could a counselor talk about, and again, it may be different in I think it's probably the same in more rural areas, but can somebody talk about their their experience helping people navigate these other systems? I mean, do you find that, is that something you're spending some time on? Laura, I'm sorry you're at the top. But I mean, I know it's not all your job, to help individual people. But I've seen that counselors, if they notice there's a gap, I mean, they take time out and they will connect people, and they'll follow up too, Do you find that that's,
Yeah, I mean, if anybody else wants to chime in, please do. I don't want people to get sick of hearing from me, but I agree, and I think we've talked about that. And again, like speaking for my district, and that nobody, again, is available or is able to do it, or who fits that kind of a niche in some of those communities. And even in, Aberdeen and Pierre are larger communities that my district covers. Some of those other services may not have providers available, or, whatever it might be. So you do pick up the pieces. We refer to ourselves as life coaches oftentimes, and not oftentimes, but sometimes you're like, we need that other role, and nobody really fills that. So you kind of become that all-encompassing person in someone's life at times. Yeah.
It's like it's just interesting because as a counselor, you see better than anybody else, I think, probably all the gaps, like, especially like I'm having this experience with self-employment, where, like, somebody gets told, who maybe wants to start a business, oh, hey, you can go to the SBDC or the SCORE or go talk to business, and there's all these great resources. But giving somebody like a resource guide, and say, hey, Social Security's over here, or like how, what I mean? It's just like that. That's hard for any, I think, a human being, like writing a business plan, there's probably, and that's a unique example, but there's probably, I don't think 99.9% of all adults in the United States probably can't write a business plan on their own, without supports. And I think, that's all adults, right? Not just adults experiencing disability. And I think it's similar with some of these benefits, is that just saying, hey, you should look into housing. That's a gap, because, and as a counselor, you're going to see that, I think, more than other people, about how it's not enough that the services exist. But, that's like the first step. All the hard work is implementing the services, helping people access them, and then make sure they fit, and they work for people as people's lives move on. So in that, typically, I find that's oftentimes where the counselors are headed, at least to some extent, is helping fill those gaps. And I don't know how, I don't know that shows up a lot in like kind of traditional job descriptions of VRCs, or our idea of that. Helps if you have allies, of course, or partners. Anybody want to add anything about that?
I was just going to put in there too, coming from not a counselor perspective, when we have individuals that require or need more than just our job development, I just want to give props to our counselors around here. They are very good about letting us know what other entities, we'll just call them, that these people are working with. So then we're able to then reach out to those same entities as well. I know, like with our mental health provider here, we meet with them once a month, and we go over the people that we work with that are also clients of theirs. So that way, if we're seeing something, we can talk to them about it, and then their case managers can help them work on that. That's not in our job title. Yeah. Or, our independent living center, the gal that runs all of that, if we see this person, is coming to work with these issues, we can call her if she's working with them and say, could you guys maybe start working on some of these things? It's just really great to be able to have all those extra parties in the picture, and being able to reach out to those parties and have that open communication. And our counselors over here do great with that, letting us know who everybody is and what supports they're helping and who to reach out to.
Awesome. Yeah, obviously this is a training on vendors and or on VR and counselors. CRPs are doing the same. You guys are doing a lot of the same stuff, and certainly, it takes a team to help people, I think, access what they need and make sure it works for them. I think that was one of the, the weird things as you learn about like transition, and hopefully, hopefully Prietz is helping a lot in this. I met a lot of parents who they literally fight wars, I don't know if I told this story, to get their son or daughter the services they need. And I don't know if I shared this story about my aunt. And again, teachers are wonderful. I'm not saying it's everybody. We know it's not, but just a local real story. This happened to my aunt. My cousin, has an autism label, and they, they didn't want him to be in. They wanted him to be integrated, to be in, they didn't want to be in separate classes, but they needed some help. He needed some help sometimes, right? Not all the time, just sometimes. And this had a really hard time getting that, getting what they need, what they felt they needed. And they're very affluent relatively, so they know how to ask for, they know how to work the system well. But when they wrote the IEP, they had the meeting. They asked for an aide sometimes, and what the person wrote in the IEP, and this seems like so stupid, but they wrote he'll receive aid, AID, not aid, AIDE. And just that small thing, which they thought was caused on purpose, that just, now we have to redo the IEP, and it took some time, and which is kind of an example of how people fight. And I just met parents who battle. They win the battle, the war, to get the services that their son or daughter needs, to get individualized services in school. And then the next battle is the services aren't really effective, or not quality services, or there's staff turnover or whatever. I just, and again, I think all of us, whatever role we have, VRCs, accessing the services is very, very important. But making sure the services fit and the services work, the implementation, that's the important part, and it's not always the case that happens. Okay. So to talk a little bit about VR counselor background, education, and training. And again, I don't, part of this is kind of weird, me talking about it when it's counselors, but so, and again, they're not one that's good or bad or worse, but some places, some states, like the state of Iowa, I think the goal is that staff get their masters, and I think that they can work on it. I think my colleague Ashley said RSA will pay for your degree if you or reimburse you. I don't know if anybody's done that, your counseling degree. If you work in the field for a certain amount of time, there's money out there to do that. And so you'll be a counselor and then go for your master's. In a lot of places, that's not needed. And I don't, depending on where you are, I could talk a little bit about the education, but I haven't seen that there's any difference in quality depending on what schooling people have. But the experience is typically not school only. That's something that I've seen. Again, this may be a bit anecdotal, but I think probably y'all could back me up a little bit, where that, it's like for me to get into this, to know this, all this stuff is typically it's not in our everyday lives. The way I learned about VR and Medicaid services and disability services in general is because I made a friend who I met. Again, I may have told you this. I met a guy when I was in college. I waited tables and I'd go to the pool, and this guy was there, and he always had a group of pretty girls around him, and so I was like, that guy's a good guy to know. I was a young person in college, and so I got to know him, and what I learned is that Keith. He was really good with people, and especially good with people wanted to be around him, and young women wanted to be around him. So I wanted to be around him and the young women. And what I learned was that he was there as a part of it was a summer camp kind of thing called Stepping Stones. And so there were staff there. And again, this is a horrible way to my introduction into the profession. There were staff there that were helping him. So I thought, hey, that's cool. I got to know him a little bit, and it was at the end of summer. So the next summer I worked there, and then I got to know him as friends, got to know his family. But so that's how I kind of got into it. Is it's typically not school only. And, you know, typically there's some kind of you know, personal experience, professional experience that people have before they are a counselor. It's not just, you know, I don't know how rare it is, but it's not every day that you'll meet somebody who went straight to rehab and now they're a rehab counselor without having something else that put them in that direction, which I guess you could say is true about any career somewhat. So education, Jordan, you had mentioned that it's, I think they, you know, bachelor's college and like I said, some getting master's while working. So I just think, again, I think it's interesting. I've always thought it was interesting. Again, that goes back to the counseling thing that I've always thought it's interesting that there's kind of counseling and maybe social work, or there's not a lot of, it seems like business or that kind of stuff, you know. And I thought, you know, I just thought that's interesting. And then Jordan, would you mind talking about the on-the-job stuff, if you don't mind?
Yeah, and I think we kind of touched on this before. A couple people mentioned it, that, you know, being a VR counselor, there's so much to it. And there's some things that, you know, we couldn't even begin to explain to people until they experience it. And so I think it was Anne that said, you know, she was 7 years in before she felt like she had a really good grasp on all of the things that were available to a VR counselor to provide as services to people. And so, you know, it's a lot of, you know, you start and you have a caseload. And so then you learn how to do the very basic parts of being a counselor. And then just as you're here longer and encounter different situations, you continue to learn about what it's like to help somebody with college services. You learn about what it's like to help somebody with employment services, what it's like to work with independent living services, you know, what it's like to provide counseling to somebody with that's learning how to live with an acquired disability. You know, it's you very much learn those situations as you encounter them, because you don't encounter everything all at once. So it's definitely a lot of learning and growing into the position. Even those that come in with a master's degree, you know, I took a little bit different track. I finished my degree while I was working, but, you know, I think I could speak even for those that got their degree before they started, that it's continually learning and growing and finding out about all the different things that we can do and how that can benefit people.
Is there any, is there like any kind of intentional tracking of, I guess, of like years, like 7 years, like, is there, and this is a horrible way to put it, but is there any kind of like checklist of like, okay, I've had exposure to all these broad categories, or that like if time passes, people aren't getting exposed to it, like you guys could intentionally try to help people shadow with somebody, or, you know what I'm saying? Or that person kind of start to, their job would kind of turn into something that's focused more on what they've seen prior. You know what I mean?
We do have a tracking system for training for counselors. But as far as like a specific checklist.
That's a bad example. Yeah, just like an idea of, how to.
But, and I think kind of the approach that we take, and, you know, I know there are a couple supervisors on here, so definitely tell me if I'm taking the wrong approach, because I'm not a supervisor of counselors. And so, you know, my perspective, having been a counselor though, is, you know, we see our clients as individuals and want to individualize those services. And so I think the tendency is to take an individualized approach to that training too. And that, you know, okay, this is the first time you've encountered this situation, then we'll work you through that so that you know what that's going to look like for next time. Cool.
And then you'd know, like if somebody needs some mentoring, you know, you know who to go to get that person. Are there any like intent, like does a new hire have a mentor or somebody to help them this first 6 months?
Nothing formal, I wouldn't say.
Supervisor.
Yeah, obviously that the supervisor relationship, but as far as like formal mentor, we don't have anything like that in South Dakota.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I do a quick word about the master's degree is that and again, I don't have a master's rehab counseling. But what I seem to have learned through talking to people and then a little bit, tiny bit of research is that the master's degree may not expose counselors to, it may not spend tons of time on things like supported employment or customized employment or self-employment, or even maybe traditional kind of CRP vendored services. Against, like we said, it's heavy, or not heavy, it's more tilted towards counseling. So I just think, you know, I just, again, from a CRP perspective, I just think that it's important to know, you know, that you know, that, and I think, like, for instance, customized employment is relatively new. And I think sometimes people are learning at around the same time, you know, I think, you know, I struggled sometimes when I felt like, because I had been immersed in supported employment at the time, that perhaps counselors didn't have the understanding, you know, that I had, which is super unfair, you know, and for the counselor, you know, on my part, it's very presumptuous on my end, to the extent where, you know, I mean, I did not do a good job of, like, I was probably speaking in a different language when I look back at it, you know, that I was making assumptions and using words that, you know, I mean, that perhaps I should have done a better job of just making sure we're on the same page. And you know, maybe sharing some information if needed. So so just in terms of familiarity with employment services, it may not be that somebody comes to the job with that, which we've already talked about. But again, that partnership and communication, which we'll talk about, is going to be super important. And then we talked about too, specialization of caseloads. Jordan, you mentioned, you said that doesn't typically happen. Although, you know, somebody, if a VR counselor experiences a disability, let's say they maybe it was visual impairment or somebody signs, perhaps that they may be, based on their skill set and experience, perhaps guided towards somewhat of a specialization of employment seekers and clients.
Yeah, it doesn't happen a lot, but if somebody comes in with a lot of knowledge about a certain area or a lot of knowledge about a certain topic or whatever, there are some specialized caseloads. It doesn't happen a ton, but
okay.
And then sometimes that's just how things are structured to kind of split things up too. I mean, you know, we have territories that we cover, counties and things like that. But you know, for example, in Watertown, my caseload was specialized because we had multiple agencies within Watertown just because of the area. And so to kind of help streamline that a little bit, it made sense to specialize those caseloads, but that was more out of necessity of the location rather than any of our expertise coming in. Mm-hmm. You know, cool. I went into the mental health caseload because that's what was open and that's what I applied for, but it wasn't necessarily that I came in with more experience in that area than anybody else.
Okay, cool. So it's both as a response to maybe counselors' background experience and life, whatever, and also just a response to what's needed, you know, right. What's actually happening on the ground in terms of client needs. Yep. Great. Anybody want to add anything to VR? I mean, let me know if I'm off base on anything, or is there a general kind of sense of what kind of educate? Again, I don't think it's that important, you know, at all. But do we find, you know, does anybody want to speak about an education background that you think you see a lot from rehab counselors? Any experience? I mean, it tends to be, I think there are CRP staff who then move on. As a number of people, I think, have already said, to VRs. Not sure how often it goes the other way. Would anybody like to add anything to any of this? Anything I'm getting wrong, or you'd like me to, or you can tell me to modify, or no? I'm sure there's a lot of. You're very welcome to tell me that I'm full of crap or I'm off on some things. So it's again, a lot of this is my experience talking to, you know, we have I've spent time with a lot of VRCs, voc rehab counselors, and we have I think we have 2 or 3 on staff, So they're all, you know, whenever I bump into something, a policy thing or like right now, what we're trying to deal with is you know, so we in customized employment, we talk about vocational themes, and those are broad areas. They don't necessarily mesh really well with IBE work goals, which is typically a job or something, you know, roughly. And so they're the ones we go to for that. And how, you know, how do you make things make sense within the system? Okay. So just some common roles for counselors. So eligibility determination, that's something that that counselors are spending some time on. You know, and that, which you know, I guess could, again, sorry to ask a counselor, but I mean, is this, how much of your time with each individual? I mean, you're asking people to bring you documentation, maybe coordinating with other services. But could somebody speak to that? Like how much time there's a counselor, if you don't mind, that they're spending on eligibility determination for VR services? I mean, somebody has SSI or SSDI, they're presumed eligible. Is this something that that takes up some of your time?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
It kind of depends. You know, there are times that, you know, we might get 5 pages of records, and so we review that and we're able to make somebody eligible. I had cases where I got literally boxes of records that I had to review. So obviously that takes a little bit longer. You know, that's again very individualized. There are sometimes, you know, we review the records and then we find out that we don't necessarily have enough information to make somebody eligible, and then we have to coordinate with the person to do additional testing or additional evaluations. So it's hard to define. We spend this much of our time on that process.
Yeah.
Because it looks different for everybody. Depending on your caseload too, there are times that we see influxes of applications. So if you have a pretty transition heavy or high school student heavy caseload, you're going to have a lot of applications at the beginning of the year, just because that's when you're starting to go to IEPs and introducing services to people and things like that. You know, there are other factors that contribute to, you might have 10 applications come in 1 week. And then so obviously in the next couple of weeks, you're going to be spending a lot more time doing eligibility determinations than you would have been a couple of weeks prior to that. So it really just depends on kind of the person and the situation. You know, I think just the more important thing, or that I always like to talk to the people that I worked with about, is, you know, there is an eligibility determination process. So we have to go through that with every single person that comes through our door. Like it, you know, with the exception of somebody being on Social Security already, and we do still go through that process with them, by the way, but they're just automatically eligible. But, you know, we have to take that time to gather that information. There's a lot of documentation to make somebody eligible on our end, and do all of that documentation to provide somebody services. Like that is, you know, kind of that first, aside from the application itself, that first piece that we have to do as counselors. And it's important because it's not just as somebody eligible for services, it's getting that understanding of, this is who this person is, this is what their diagnosis is, and this is exactly what this means to them, and this is how it impacts them. Because we need to know those things to know how it's going to impact them vocationally, to know where to start with our counseling, where to start with all of those different things.
Yeah.
So that didn't really answer, I went beyond what you asked.
No, it's, but counselors for every other caseload, they are involved in the eligibility determination for each person. Is that correct? Or it's not contracted out to somebody else in the office?
Correct.
Okay. So I just think it's important to know, because again, we're thinking a lot about VR services and what VR does, but there's still a piece of each VR counselor's job that's the stuff before that, you know, even before really somebody gets to that point. And I just think, again, from a CRP perspective, it's just, you know, I think in the Medicaid world, there's a lot of specialization, you know, the case manager, you know, housing, you know, there's people that we can go to if we are employment in the Medicaid world that do that, you know, that we can go get information. in the VRC world, the counselors are doing a lot of things that are typically, for Medicaid, oftentimes, the county does that, or or the state, or depending on where you live. So I just think that it's it's a lot. It's just a lot of responsibilities there. And then of course, as we filter through, determination of assessments, IP development, right? So what's going to be done to figure out what the IP, what the work goal is, and then how does that filter through, right? And figure out what services are offered through the IP. And the other thing I wanted to mention, and again, you guys are probably doing this, is just how helpful providers can be. And I think a lot of I think part of the fun and in building relationships with VRC counselors is just to help make their job a bit easier if we can, not just, again, go to them for the money, but understand that if we could help at all with getting information for disability determination, that especially if we're working with somebody who's a part of a pre-existing service system, offer information. Again, it's the VRC's in control of that, but I think passing along whatever we can during these processes, I think that I just think that to understand again that these are things that VRCs are going to be doing, and it's quite a bit of work. That as much as we can help logistics or interpreting things or providing some background information, I just think that helping VRCs make their jobs easier, or helping things be maybe streamlined, go smoother. I found that counselors really appreciate that. Again, not that you're not telling people what to do, or you're just helping people access information so that the system can move a bit quicker, greasing the wheels, so to speak. The other thing that I think is interesting, again, when thinking about CRPs and VR counselors, and this was something that Ashley shared with me, is one thing that she's seen when teaching VRCs and kind of working in the middle ground, in kind of in between both worlds, is helping counselors identify individuals who may need more intensive support needs, right? Maybe more individualized supports. Every IP is individualizes every word in the Rehab Act, as Carrie Griffin likes to say. But I think sometimes it's not so clear. How counselors are able to identify, when people may need these intensive support needs. So I'm just curious, again, if from a CRP perspective and from a counselor perspective, what Ashley helped share is like what are the clues? What are the, again, if we're talking about more kind of personalized services, more intensive services, direct services. I'm just curious what, as counselors, I guess, how do you make that decision? Like what are the criteria or clues? And I don't know that there's anything official, but what are some of the things that are identified as a VRC, as a counselor? It helps that you may need the help or the support of a CRP, of a vendor, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? What are the common kind of qualities or criteria or cues that make you as a VRC think that maybe partnering with a CRP would be a good idea, or a service is a good idea?
I think that just comes back to our counseling and guidance process. I don't know that there's necessarily any cues or criteria that anybody has to meet, but part of the counseling and guidance process is once we've kind of gotten to know the person and know what their goals are and what they feel that they need as far as supports, and, discuss those things. Then as part of that process, we discuss what the options are, and find out what the person's thoughts are about utilizing those different services and things like that. So I don't think there's any like really criteria or clues, but we make that part of our process when working with people is making it a point to, we talk about informed choice a lot, but making sure that people know that what all of their options are as far as services that could be helpful to them, and then making those recommendations.
Okay. What about maybe I can how about how do you know if somebody like supported employment? Like how do you decide whether that would be perhaps something that would work for somebody? Does that make sense? I mean, I know it's what's significant or most significant is kind of the label. I'm just curious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the same thing. We do have a little bit more criteria for supported employment. If somebody is receiving like DD funding, for example, that's something that we, and without going into the whole process we go through for that, that's an indicator for us that that's maybe somebody that's probably going to need some more supports and some more of those supported employment type services versus somebody who is just a community client. Yeah,
cool. And supported employment, sometimes it's, DD systems would be an obvious indicator, And then sometimes are those services being offered maybe to people who don't have developmental disability services? But there's some indicator of ongoing supports, even if they're not paid, would be valuable.
Right. And again, that's part of the counseling and guidance process is we just get to know people and who they are and where their supports are coming from. And, somebody who has a lot of supports in place, whether they're formal, informal, paid, unpaid, whatever that looks like, then that we utilize that information to determine if somebody is going to receive supported employment kind of services or not.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Okay, so I guess what I'm getting at or trying to head with that is that oftentimes we're working with people, and again, whether they're part of and there's a bunch of people in West Virginia who are kind of in between the gaps who may not have the history of intensive services for whatever reason. And I guess one of the things that I found interesting, especially with people who don't have the obvious paper trail that you can point to justify certain services from a CRP perspective is how do you give a counselor information so they can make a decision, right, to help inform them, kind of without, and I've gotten in trouble a few times like this, right, without counselors feeling like you're telling them what to do, So I think that's a tricky balance, especially if you know somebody a little bit. I met an example. I met a woman who she was at one point she was institutionalized, and the reason she was institutionalized because she had been in a traditional marriage, and her raising kids, husband, and like the husband I guess wasn't very nice, and then at one point he just kind of, we'd call it ghosting now, but when I met her, that term hadn't appeared yet, and it was I think reasonably justifiably traumatic, and she had a hard time. But when I met her, she had put pieces back together and was moving on. She had met a lawyer who helped her get on SSI. And I just remember trying to help her access she hadn't worked in a while, trying to help her access kind of, when you met her, she didn't necessarily remind counselors of other people who were receiving supported employment services. And so there was it wasn't easy to help her get, more intensive services because she, again, when she had been interacting with the system, it was maybe it was probably 2 years or 3 years ago, and she had her stuff together now. But there are good reasons that supports will work for her, and they may look a little different. But so I think that part of it's just an interesting, I think, figuring that out. How do you give people information in a way, again, that you're not overburdening them, or you're not trying to necessarily tell counselors what to do, but where counselors feel like they're getting information, they need to make a decision. And I think again, well, this is in West Virginia where that happens, so we're small too, but it seems like counselors here are pretty cool in terms of listening and having conversations. Any thoughts about that? Has anybody had any experiences similar to that?
I guess I would say in relation to like a story that you just shared, it reminds me of here, maybe if somebody isn't receiving long-term support through like a community support provider because they don't have that federal funding, we use independent living choices or the IL services to try to help bridge those gaps. They're short-term cases, but just trying to pull in all of those resources to then provide. It's not technically supported employment in our definition of funding and stuff like that, but in terms of the full scale support, in terms of housing and independent living needs and things like that, community support.
Yeah, and supported employment's a label, for just essentially support at the point of need and follow along support, and the middle stuff is to be figured out. So cool. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of ways, again, using work incentives or coworker supports, there's a lot of ways to have that plan for people who, after VR gets out, after 90 days or whatever, like closure criteria, after stability, it's likely that the people would, it may not be intensive support to check in, but there's some connection there to help people navigate some of the stresses of that. Okay, cool. So that's again, knowing available resources and the like. Okay, so other counselor roles, and you can see Jordan's notes to me here. So counseling, that's question mark, exclamation point. It's very true. Counseling meaning, after we've gone through the slides, that we may not understand what that means if we're not immersed in the VRC or VR world. But like Jordan said at the bottom there, making sure that all aspects are understood to the greatest extent possible, so that people can choose the right services, be offered options, and that work, so people can pursue opportunities and pursue possibilities. So, and then, and again, it's a bit of a cliche, but I know that pretty much every time when anything's broken down in any system, you can always look at communication being a major kind of contributor to that. And so I think in terms of, it's obviously key in providing information. The other thing that we've seen is that, from our, if the CRPs are kind of on the ground, and they are, if you're on the ground, you can be closer to the information. So you're going to probably have access to better, more accurate information. And so just to find a way to share that in a way that makes sense to the counselor, definitely seen that the more communication, the more counselors are able, to be creative and to try different things and provide options. And I think it's just what Jordan said. I think that ultimately all of this work is about trying to understand people, and really, again, not through labels necessarily or even service language, or even like the Rehab Act perspective. It's just really to understand where people are at now, kind of who they are, and kind of, again, the barriers like we had said earlier. So, and then providing that information in a way, again, that makes sense, helps the process, helps us get to where we all need to go. The other, and to the other extent that we've tried, but not necessarily, are people sharing, like, when they find job possibilities? Like, is that, even if it doesn't work with somebody you're working with now, are you sharing that with like the local, your counselor? Like, hey, just so you know, I made this connection. Are you doing is anybody doing any of that? That was something that we found that was really interesting. We couldn't find a great way to do it. Is we'd be out doing job development and talking to different employers, and we'd find opportunities, but they wouldn't necessarily work with somebody that we had in mind. And we struggled with, how do you communicate that with the VR, or there's other players too. because the assumption is that VR has, people have exposure to a lot of people, but they're not on the ground, right? And there can be a nice kind of balance between the two. Is that happening at all where people are, if you find a job lead or an opportunity where that's being shared?
Oh yeah, it happens all the time with us.
Cool.
Our VR counselor may be aware of a company or a small business that's looking to hire, or a new business coming into town. Kind of give us a, hey, have you checked that out yet? And then vice versa, we'll ask them about what experience they may have had with an employer.
Cool. And if you find, I mean, is that so if you find an opening and you maybe, hey, I could connect you, if you have anybody in mind, and maybe perhaps you would be the facilitator for that, or just an introduction?
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
That's really awesome.
Not all the time, but typically
Yeah.
it's like, hey, have you heard about this? And then it's basically sending us off to see if it's a fit for anyone.
Okay. That it was coming from VR to you?
Yeah, and we speak with our VR counselor as
And,
well.
and it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's awesome. I mean, I think, that's the one, and we'll be talking about that as the weeks go on. I think that business engagement, we're very kind of not found a way. I know that, maybe it's been maybe 15 years now where in some states are still doing it, where VR offices were marketing themselves as kind of like a staffing agency, come to us with your employment needs. I don't know if they're doing that so much anymore, but we just haven't done a great way haven't found a great way of just sharing information in an efficient way. Obviously, the more we can help businesses find great workers, it's best for all of us. Is somebody else going to jump in? Jessica? You're unmuted, so I don't know if you wanted to talk.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm transitioning into the employment specialist position. So everything's awfully new to me. But I also, my previous position was a mental health case manager. So we got to the extent of doing the referring out. And even in that position as a case manager, we too would kind of pitch if we knew our clients that we had on our caseload had a VR counselor. We would also make that connection with them and sharing possible position ideas. So now going into the employment specialist position, now I'm learning whose role is what and how we round out the support of the client as far as sharing potential job opportunities. And I've noticed while shadowing Connie that she does a lot of emailing back and forth when we have openings, and Department of Labor also comes into a trio in my position. Now I'm learning too. So we not only have the VR counselor, but we may have a DLR case manager. And sometimes the mental health case manager kind of is a backbone of a re-encouragement to everything the rest of us are working on. So we have a good group I'm learning too. So
very cool. Awesome. That's great. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the beauties of working in a less populated, smaller areas. I think you find this, I mean, just because it's easier, right? It's easier to get to know people and build those teams. And also people don't get stuck as much into roles. Well, this is my job. Well, that's my job. I think, and it's just part of that, the front, I don't know what the right word is, but just kind of resourcefulness, I guess, of
I guess
rural areas.
I'm going to jump in here and
Sure.
kind of turn it into a question. My experience has been the providers are rather territorial.
Mm.
And, these are my employers and those are your employers.
Yep.
So how do we break that down?
That is a great point of view, a great insight. Let's see, the job development contacting businesses. So that's going to be our next training topic. But that, I mean, so in Michigan, again, right now, this is hot topic, is that we're bumping into the same thing where we're building kind of business engagement approaches. And the first question is, the first concern is we have a referral or we have a relationship. It's not necessarily we don't want to share it. It's if somebody gets that, and they burn it, it's more a concern that people aren't going to treat it well, So the first step we've taken, I mean, ultimately you can't address that unless there's some trust. And so what we're trying to do is build and it's a database is not the right word, but we're trying to build some kind of system where we share, because you're going to have, you're going to have referrals too that you want to share. So I think all parties have to see that it's a cliche, but we're better together, and so we're lessening redundancies and kind of wasteful efforts if we can find another way to do it. So I think the first step is that everybody agrees that people have stuff to share, right? They have information, resources. The second step, is basically to build a relationship, people get to know you. And the third is that some agreement, and what we're doing is kind of a written kind of pledge, that whoever owns the inn, like that just means, and I don't even know if that's the right word, but has a relationship, like they're the gatekeeper, meaning that not that they won't share it, because they will share it, but they're the person that has to be, that queries go through, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So we're not going to circumvent them we have to ask for their permission. And we have to work through the details. But I think that's the main thing, is that people are worried that they've spent time in growing individual relationships, and that if they share that, it's not that they don't want to share necessarily, it's that they're worried that somehow there's going to be something that happens that breaks essentially I think and this is amongst CRPs, they're worried that there will be some bad work, basically, I think is what it comes down to. And then they spend all this time doing what they think is good work, and then somebody else comes out and kind of undercuts that, and then they burn the relationship. So, but the groups are willing to do that. We're just starting, but there has to be, of course, there has to be the kind of people got to know each other a bit. They got to trust each other, and also each side. You can't come to the table with your hand empty. That's again, I feel like all I'm doing is speaking cliches, but you have to bring what you have to offer and be willing to reciprocate. Mutuality there, and then there's got to be some system where people, if they're going to offer up a contact, that they feel comfortable that in the way that contact is going to be approached is good. And I think over time, what we hope will happen is that like there'll be relationships built so people won't be so protective. They'll trust you or somebody else to do a good
I think
job.
part of it is, it's kind of a 50-50 split between, I don't want somebody else to mess up what I've set up. And part of it is, if I tell them, they're going to get the placement and they're going to get paid and I'm not.
Yeah. And that's the short term. So there's that's just kind of like social capital 101, like working together 101, which is people have to understand that a short-term, what is viewed as a short-term loss is actually a long-term gain. I like this, I use this quote, Alex de Tocqueville, he called it self-interest rightly understood, that if we help each other out in the long term, self-interest, we help each other because they'll help us, as time passes. But that's the thing, people have to trust that that's going to happen, and they have to be seen. They have to, I mean, there has to be a return on that too, so, and I think, again, that's about bringing what you have to the table, showing people that it's in all of our best interests. I mean, if I'm working with somebody, and then also, I mean, maybe, being flexible with how that works. I mean, if there's another provider and they have a contact with a business that kind of works for the guy I'm working with, perhaps there's something we can work out, that, I mean, it's in that person's best. We do this work for one reason, I mean, primarily it's about the individual. There's something we can work out. I mean, VR counselor systems and businesses, that's just, it's an investment in kind of future successes. So I mean, that's tough. It's a big issue that I think that we're starting to work on, how to engage businesses across, how not to be territorial, how not to own. It's really been frustrating, and we're past time now, but when you go to a business and, oh no, we work with so-and-so, and then that's whoever works with them. I mean, that's interesting, right? And I don't, I just.
When I had a former provider, he's since retired, thank God. But he was a good one. He'd call me up and say, I've got a job, give me an applicant.
Yeah.
And I'd be, what's the job? And he's, I'm not going to tell you. I won't get paid then.
Yeah. So,
It's
I mean,
like,
that
it doesn't work that way, dude.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know how you can, you know, that's, I mean, that cuts off half the information for counseling. Is like, I mean, knowing the person is one half, the other half is knowing, you know, if the job's a match, right? So yeah, I think a basic misunderstanding. That's part of it, you know, a little bit about this, maybe basic misunderstanding of the role of a VR counselor and of CRPs, you know, of that's not really a partnership. So yeah. Well, sorry, we're out of time. I just wanted to briefly mention, you know, closures used to be like this huge effort. People's whole lives, VRCs were, you gotta get closures, gotta get 20, 24s, 22s, 26s. Used to call it that. And now I think, like Jordan had said, that things are more balanced. You know, that's obviously important, but not the main, not the whole bag. And then, you know, in terms of, I think what counselors may be afraid of is spending money that's not going to be effective. So as a CRP, again, sorry, just know that when we're, I mean, hopefully, you know, we understand nothing's guaranteed. But when you're proposing something to a counselor, or you're talking, I mean, they are essentially they're not on the hook, but they're responsible for that, you know. And so again, it's about information. It's about answering questions about. So just I like to think of it like a return on investment kind of mentality. Is that the more we're requesting, the return should be there too. And you know, counselors obviously, they want the services to be effective. You don't want to see somebody on 93 days after stability, right? So, and then pace and speed is going to be important, although not the whole thing. That, you know, people want things to move forward and you know, towards their goals. So again, I apologize. 5:04 my time. I'll send you the other thing. We were just going to talk about communications, which is important. Sorry, maybe I'll bring this up briefly when we talk to we do the next one, and then some other things. But just the rule of thumb. Last thing I'll leave you with. It's just when we're working together, and again, we already know this, just always give the VRC the benefit of the doubt. Today's about VRCs. The same rule applies for CRPs, but it's rare that procedures are just black and white. You know, counselors have flexibility. They have the ability to be creative, and it's on purpose because there's a huge system you got to apply to individual needs. So just, you know, it's just a good thing, I think, always to give the benefit of the doubt to the VRC. And you know, things don't go the way they think it did. Give them a benefit of the doubt and talk to them, right? Ask when you have a question, and ask for help when we're not sure. You're not sure what to do. Something's complicated or novel. Odds are the counselor's seen something similar before, as they have experience. And so I think that's again something we don't do enough of. Is if there's a barrier to say to the counselor, you know, hey, I'm not sure what to do. Can you give me some ideas, some suggestions on how to move forward? So again, sorry to keep you 5 minutes after, but cool. Any questions or anything? No. Okay. Cool. You're gonna say you said the word a couple times, right? Magic word.
Yeah, I did attendance anyway because my form wasn't working.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
Attendance. Yep. So
My bad.
should be all good.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Thanks, all. See you next time.